Now, in October, I had just come back from that camping trip in Maine that all the church members and supporters go to. You know, my kids told me that Hyungjin's kids were keeping to themselves, and the only occasion that I had with Hyungjin, oddly enough, was when me and Larry went down the cliff to go fishing. This was off the like the north side or the north end of the cliff. Hyungjin was camped out at the sort of like the center part of the slope, and most people went fishing, and they went down the cliff towards the south end. So here we are, me and Larry sitting on a group of rocks, not too visible from anybody else fishing. And so Hyungjin comes over in I think it was a kayak, and he just asked me how I'm doing. And that's really the only exchange that I had with him on that whole trip, because they had made sure that the campsite that we had right next to his family the year before was taken by security, by Lowell's couple. And Cookchin made he made a site out of no site right next to right in front of Hyunjin. And I remember that first morning walking up and saying hi to Hyunjin, and not saying anything at all to Cookchin, because I was pretty sure that he knew about what his inner circle people had been doing to me. And they those people couldn't be working as one force without him knowing about it. And so that was that. The only time that Hyungjin came over, pretty much, was when nobody else could see except me, Larry, and him. And I felt like he may have known that they were on some kind of a campaign to squeeze me. I thought maybe this campaign is completely to make me relent, or maybe it's to totally squeeze me out. But how could it be to squeeze me out if we were still in a matching together? So I think they were trying to get me to see the error of my ways as a bad Cain, and surrender to being more respectful, in the future. Something like that. I really couldn't figure out what the extent or the ultimate goal of this tactic was. At the very least of it was to change the subject away from pursuing the apology from Lord of Schwartz, even if they consciously didn't know that that's what the evil spirit world, that's what the satanic spirit world had them doing it for. Anyway, that camp was over. I left a day early because, Hyungjin and those guys were giving us a cold shoulder, and I'm like, oh, okay, I come from Realville, I'm like, I don't hang out where I'm not wanted, you know what I'm saying? So, that's the way this game is played, so, I don't kiss ass, I don't suck on wee-wees, and, I don't hang out where I'm not wanted, so, we packed up, and we got out of there, but, I'm still committed to the concept of Channel Gook, and I'm still committed to the idea that the Archangel should be captured. And so, what was the problem with the other court? The other court was, well, it didn't have two states. It wasn't based on two states. And so that's why Tim Elder said that, this can't represent Channel Gook because it doesn't have two states. Now, you got to understand, this is within the mind of whoever made the United States of Channel Gook, okay? So I'm trying to appease that issue. Okay, so a few of us got together and drafted up something called the Citizens Covenant. We kicked it around, we Zoom called it, okay, and by the end of October, it had been signed by like 30 people. It had 3 affirmations. One, that the divine principle is the central, is the truth of God. divine principle in Chun Sung Young. The two, that Sun Myung Moon is the central person, seed person, believe it said, of the tree of life. And three, Chanuguk exists currently. So this is called the Citizens Covenant. These are affirmations of people who live in Chanuguk. Okay, Chanuguk has a basis both in truth. That's affirmation number one, and affirmation number two is Chanuguk is based on the lineage or the seed given by Adam, Sun Myung Moon. So the third affirmation is that this is already intact, and if you think in terms of like deep theology and 5% portion of responsibility, our 5% portion of responsibility is to recognize what it is that we have inherited in our blood and as lords. So we say that Chanuguk does exist because if the children do not acknowledge that Chanuguk exists, if there's no culture or means that pass to the children a sense of what Adam was all about, why he didn't eat the fruit, why he later did eat the fruit with God's blessing. If people don't understand the difference between why he didn't eat the fruit before and its bearing that it would have had on us as subsequent generations, and why he did eat the fruit together with God and its bearing on us as subsequent generations. If people don't understand this as owner of lineage, right? That's one of the 8 textbooks. It's one speech that made it into the list of 8 textbooks as a textbook itself. Is one speech. Owner of lineage. Okay, so that third affirmation is about that. Okay, so we were drafting this up from, I guess, sometime in September. What we did with it, that comes later. But right after that camp, I had submitted no work, a time sheet saying that I did no work in September. Now, you got to understand, in the school system in New Jersey, they often let September go by without giving me, without scheduling me for to teach any abstinence classes. In fact, most of the 10 years that I worked for Richard, I think I've only done September classes once. And Richard should know that and be aware of that, because that's fact. So when, instead of going to Patterson back and forth every day, I'd be calling up and scheduling classes with people that always schedule classes in October. So I had done that for quite a few years, where, here and there, this year, yes, the next year, no. I don't even have to go. I can just call up the schools that, I know want to take me early on in the school year, And I was explaining this to Richard, because he was like, why are you not putting in any hours? And I was like saying, well, to go to Maine, I guess he and his friends get to go to Maine, but peons like me are forced into work, right? And I'm like, why am I forced to go to Patterson when Patterson never gives me classes? And this trip to Maine, my family, my kids, my wife would like to go. So I'm not submitting a timesheet asking you to pay me for, the month of September. He said, put in a timesheet anyway. So I did, and then he uses that to start making an argument about how he wants to cut my pay. And I think it didn't make sense, because I would say to him, yeah, but I look at last year's timesheet, look at the year before that. I never do classes. I'm already lined up for some other schools for October, but there's nothing for me to do, And I can make up the budget that's set aside for my salary, for my pay for the year. I can make it later on in the year, so it's not like I'm personally missing that money. So it's not as though he had a logical reason to cut my money in half. And I said, you're going to cut the money that the feds give you to pay me to teach X number of kids, and then you're still going to have me teach the same number of kids, but you want to cut my salary because of the amount of hours that it takes. Of course it takes less hours to set up teaching the same number of kids, because I already got my contacts set. So anyway, that was the argument. But he kind of railroaded or rammed through this reality where he was like, no, I'm going to ask them to pay you at the church. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want that. He said, yeah, I'm going to look into that. And I'm like, so he's talking to me wearing both hats, okay? the Free Teens President hat and the Sanctuary Church President hat. So, I'm not going to take a job at the church, because if I'm working for the church, then they're going to say, you're a public official. right? Up until that point, I was a supporter who volunteered to do the youth programming, right? So before I've gotten my apology as a child of God, nobody's going to remember that I was standing in the patron, volunteer, child of God volunteer position. And so they're trying to erode the high ground, I realized. So I really can't afford to take this job. And Richard cut my salary in half. So, okay, so I'm like, my identity, my person, is under assault in that this title, this divine title, child of God, is not going to be respected if I take this job working for an entity that previously set conditions of disrespecting me. And so I have to secure this apology before I even think about working for this organization, because if I go to work for this organization, it's as if I jumped into a relationship that I knew was abusive. Does that make sense? So it's Richard who's pushing this, because under these circumstances, I would never work for that organization. But Richard is trying to force it by cutting my salary in half. I'm going to be desperate to feed my family, make ends meet. The ends weren't meeting anyway. So to feed my family, and then I'm going to take the material represented by the money from the church, right? To feed my family and all this kind of stuff, which would have had the effect spiritually on the case and the condition that I was trying to set in relation to the archangel surrendering. So when I saw that, I determined two things. If he cuts my salary in half, which he did by sending me some official letter, if he cuts my salary in half, I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to not screw the black people of Patterson by leaving right then and there. I'm going to teach that year of abstinence education for 1,350 students, give them 6 to 8 sessions, and so I'm going to conclude that year, but I'm going to quit. All right, I'm going to quit because I cannot keep my family under the domain of someone who tried to hand me over to the church. Okay, and my family deserves better than that. Okay, and the next thing that I determined is that they called a meeting to talk about me working at the church. I'm going to tell them clearly, if I don't get an apology from the church representing the organization that hired this foreign national, this alien who abused me, if I don't get an apology, there's no way I'm going to come work for that organization. All right, so I get a call from Greg Knoll, or email, and they set up the meeting. So after Sunday service, a week after the main trip, I'm in a room. I heard from Greg that it was going to be me, Greg, and Hyungjin. But what turned out was me, Greg, Deputy Doug, and Cook Junk. And he was cooking junk. And so he said, so Cook Junk is taking the lead in guiding the conversation. And so he says, you've been making a lot of trouble out there, Jamal. You've been upsetting a lot of people. And I'm like, yeah, that's just muddy waters. So he follows political conflicts. He knows what muddy waters is. And he goes, I'm not sure. I'm not so sure. And I said, no, well, more specifically, it's the people that you brought to Pennsylvania with you. Okay? That's who's doing this. He goes, no, I go to bat for you. I go to bat for you. I'm like, yeah, it shows. So he said, so you want to come to work here? I was like, no, I don't want to come to work here. Anyway, so you want to come work here? And I said, no, I don't want to come work here. I volunteer here. I prefer to stay as a volunteer. I came to talk about the fact that if you guys want me to work here, which I know they want me to do, because they want me in that malleable position, you know what I'm saying? So I was like, if you guys want me to come work here, I think he thought I was already softened up by having my salary cut, you know? But I was like, yeah, that didn't phase the Son of God, you know? That's just money. So I'm telling him, no, if you want me to come work here, then I'm only work here under certain circumstances. And that is, if I get an apology from this woman or an apology from this organization who hired her. Under those circumstances, as a child of God, I could then think that, you know, you were respecting me as a child of God to begin with. And I said, other than that, I can't come to work here. He goes, let me get this straight. You don't want to work here. And I said, no, I didn't really say that. I said, there's no way I could work here unless you guys issued an apology. He said, well, the king can't do that. I said, why not? It was his court. It was his worker. You said that the sanctuary church is his property. Okay, so why can't he have someone officially apologize on behalf of the organization? You know, and then I reminded him. I said, besides, you're not the king. And so Hyunjin, you know, sitting there, just kind of like he was used to Cookchin him just taking the reins, and you know, so I just started to point to my laptop where I had drafted up some bullet points about what she had done to me, like the points in the court case. There were like 4 sections of the court case, so I boiled them down to bullet points. So I needed an apology for these 4 slights that she committed against me. So before I got to talk about that, Cookchin was saying, you know, a second and third time, he was like, the king can't do that. And every time he said the king can't do that, I said to him, you're not the king. Now you got to imagine, like, we're at a rectangular table about 6 feet long, 8 feet long. He's at the north end of the table. I'm on the west end of the table, and Hyungjin's on the south end of the table. Greg Knowles on the east end of the table, and Doug Williams is sitting behind me, up against the wall. All right, so 3 times I told him, you're not the king. 3 times I had to repeat, there's no way I'd come to work for you. 3 times he said, okay, let me get this straight. You don't want to come work for us. I said, no, I'm saying that there's no way I could come work for you because I hadn't gotten an apology. So already, you know, I don't know why. It's such a cumbersome form of spin. It's like, man, like the emperor really is not wearing any clothes because, I mean, what a cumbersome attempt at spin. You know, so you don't want to come work for us. I was like, no. I said, there's no way I could work for you if you hadn't issued an apology. You know, so anyway, the 4th time he says, the king can't do that. Of course, I look at him, I say, you're not the king. And then he went on, pushed right through that, so I turned away and I looked at Hyunjin. And I said, if you establish something, okay, and he doesn't like it, and so he leaves his position because he doesn't like it, that's his responsibility. In other words, if Hyunjin is able, and Abel establishes something, Abel authorizes something, Abel sets something in motion, and Cain, who has the free will to support or not support, chooses not to support, that's something that Abel can't do anything about. But, you know, all this had happened because Hyunjin did not know what to do about Cookchin wanting to retain Lourdes. Cookchin wanted to retain Lourdes. So Hyunjin doesn't know what to do when Cain won't follow or if Cain won't agree. So in the interest of keeping unity, he would just let Cain have his way and say, well, at least I'm keeping unity like True Father told me to. But that's actually unity centered on Cain. So this is why, you know, I made the point that, you know, that Hyunjin was in the driver's seat. So, you know, how are you going to hire and fire and decide who's good for an organization and who's not good for an organization, which was Cookchin's role. He decides personnel. Okay, so he was at that meeting. It was an ambush meeting because I didn't expect to, you know, go up against his his way of thinking and, you know, to deal with him as a person. So at the end, I had told Hyunjin that, you know, well, either I said I would offer an apology at this Kumbaya meeting, you know, and I'm like, even then I'm like, what is it that I really can apologize for? It would be like one of those Hillary Clinton type apologies where I apologize to the community that they took my tactics online the wrong way. So I'm apologizing for their not understanding, you know. So I said, yeah, well, yeah, I could do that, you know. So he was like, okay, so we'll have a Kumbaya meeting where Lourdes apologizes. Could you email me those 4 points that you have there? And I'm like, he said, what do you want an apology for? That's what it was. And I said, you didn't read the document? And he just sits there kind of blinking for a second, and he goes, no. So this was October. I filed the document in July. He hadn't read the document. Mind you, it's only 30 pages. And based on the arguments of Jerry Hyena and all those guys throughout the months, I take it they only read the opening segment of the document before they passed judgment on me being too childish. Why? Because the lightest claim against Lourdes was in the opening. The silliest or the lightest claim. The heavier claims come later. So what happened is, he said, could you read off your bullet points? So I read off the bullet points, and he realized that the later ones are heavier. And so he goes, oh, she basically accused you of treason. And I said, well, if that's the way you boil it down. He said, oh, yeah, yeah, I understand your point. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, at least, I'm not sure he really understood my point, but at least he was willing to let things go forward towards this Archangel's apology. And so we get up from the table, and I go home. I get a phone call from him. Mind you, I've only gotten maybe somewhere between 5 to 10 phone calls from him over the time that he's been in Pennsylvania. But I get a phone call from him, and he goes, that was good. And he said, that was a good meeting, that was good. Well, I'm like, what was good about it, And so, well, what else did he say? I can't remember right now what else he said, but he said that he was going to set up this meeting for the apology, and this opened up the possibility that the town hall meeting. At the town hall meeting, she was going to issue this apology. If I fast forward to the town hall, when she gets to the point of the apology, she does not apologize for the things in the court filing document. She apologizes for something else. So her apology is a form of non-apology. Yeah, but that was that meeting, and I think one of the most outstanding things about that meeting was that Hyungjin hadn't read the court filing after 3 months. He didn't know what I had been complaining about for 3 months. He only knew that I was upset that she had kicked us off her Facebook groups, okay, which is the simplest of the complaints. It was really to establish that there was a history. That's the only reason why I was in there. And that's why I came first. That's why it's one of the first complaints, her kicking us off the Facebook groups. So here's this guy who says we got to have this first court case, and when I said to him, why didn't you read the document? He's like, I trust Jerry and Jim and those guys. So the other outstanding thing was that it wasn't deferring to Kukchin that I saw. It was Kukchin assuming the subject position, fully aware that his brother was, I don't know, how do you say, in over his head, or in over his level of preparedness for such a meeting, or in over his head for, how to field this type of exchange or something like that. So Kukchin took the liberty to answer for Hyungjin 4 times. And I had to tell him, you're not the king. So it could be the case that in the same manner, Hyungjin trusted Kukchin to deal with those matters. And yeah. So the next thing that happened after that, October was just filled with so much stuff. Kristen Quinn got involved when she heard about the town hall, and she had always been incensed by the "there is no Chunel Gook" arguments online with Tim Elder. So she flew all the way out. Somehow she got a flight for almost nothing. She flew all the way out from Missouri, and she wanted to make the point: we are citizens. She had signed the Citizens Covenant. She had worked on the Citizens Covenant with us, and by the time the town hall meeting had come, we had almost 30 Citizens Covenants. Some of the people that signed the Citizens Covenant are still loyal to Sanctuary, and they signed the Citizens Covenant. And in the following month, November, Yun and them said that the reason why she was putting me, my family, on probation for the matching was because of the Citizens Covenant, that I had taped it to the door of the church on the last day of October, which is what I did. So the town hall meeting happened. Kristen Quinn got barked at by Deputy Doug, Santa Claus. Because when she was getting hot, from the back of the room, he yells, "There's the door!" Okay? And so she totally got treated like the panelists run the show, and that she's nobody. If you don't like it, there's the door. How does a citizen get treated in this new morphing entity called sanctuary? Well, the citizen gets told, there's the door. The head of the World Mission Department said he's not a citizen because Gideon Rauchi, who signed the Citizens Covenant, was pressing them. And so he asked them all, are you a citizen? The head of the World Mission Department said he's not a citizen. His secretary sitting right next to him said she's not a citizen. Richard Panzer said he's not sure. But he leaned on, I believe he leaned on the side of being a citizen, and so did Greg Knoll. So there's your civil relativism right there in one panel. So two of them have 1 foot in the door with Chunoguk, and the other two say Chunoguk doesn't even exist. Like I said, since Chunoguk exists by the awareness of the child, moving from younger son's mentality to elder son's mentality, it is a matter of awareness and awakening and faith as to what you inherited and its meaning. So these guys were showing that they were split right there, and Deputy Doug saw to it. You know, he's already got the taste of child of God on his chops by biting into me, disrespecting me. So he just disrespected Christian Quinn, because everybody who's a citizen of Chunoguk now is a Jamalite, right? So anyway, that's how October went. Everybody that I knew that knew there was Chunoguk was ultimately marginalized, because if the reason why later on in November I'm unsuitable as a person to be matched to is, if the reason why is because I'm leading a group of people who's going to start a splinter group of people who think they're citizens. So that means that they had clearly taken the position of disdain against the citizens. They had clearly, politically, officially, within their internal attitude, had taken a position of disdain against citizens. So the reason why they don't think Chunoguk exists is a function of a younger son's mindset, cluelessness. They don't understand that Chunoguk has to exist based on the Lord, based on the mediator and center of harmony, the children. So the children, even Father said this, the children come first. He said in the Chajuguk speech, the realm of autonomy must come before the realm of liberation. So you got to understand that the faith, the change in faith of the children, of the people, must precede the reality of the nation existing. We all have to come into the same realization that we are actually children of Adam, and then subsequently realize that we have an inheritance as his children, thus Chunoguk. But people who, you know, still doubt those things, or people who are focused on meritocratic pursuits, they don't come into this awareness, and so they just see a rival to their power, and that's all they saw. And you know, I still say, you know, nobody has launched a clear accusation against me. And Hyungjin left me at the end of that meeting trying to figure out what it is that I could apologize for, so that, you know, draw some kind of a contrived equivalence between me and Lourdes, so that maybe Lourdes and her supporters wouldn't feel so bad. So Kristen Quinn thought that's ridiculous, because I didn't actually do anything. And she said, if cursing is the only thing you did, she said, I know black people curse all the time in comedy and all this kind of stuff. She's like, you talk that way many times, so it seems. And so you guys don't get offended. I don't get offended when you curse. Why are you apologizing for it? So she talked me out of issuing an apology based on my language. And she said, Kotum curses all the time. And Hyungjin said that the father curses all the time. So what are you apologizing for? It's just a false equivalence. All right, so that's why I didn't apologize. And, well, I chose to agree with her, and I didn't apologize because it was a false equivalence. What do they call it? Whataboutism, or both sidesism. So they wanted to make me out to be equally as bad as Lourdes, so that Lourdes doesn't feel so bad, you know? Which is one of those feelings that leads to fallen nature number 4, by the way, but hey, I'll talk to you later.